Dr. Jesse, Montana. How are you, Dr. Jesse?
Very good. How are you, Mark?
Very well, my friend. Go right ahead.
Well, can you take some more bad news?
Yes, we want to know what the hell's going on out there.
Okay, well, you've done a great job in talking about some of the regulatory and tax issues, but what you're hearing tonight is what is the fundamental transformation of medical care as it's delivered to you. And the two doctors have talked a little bit about it. And I'd like to expand on that a little bit. For one thing, they've talked about the electronic medical health care record system as a way to gather data on patients, but you have to understand that the major purpose of it isn't to gather information on patients, it's to monitor doctors' practices. Because doctors are the ones who order the examinations and the tests and prescribe the medications. So if the doctors are the one who do that, how do you get them under control? And this goes back to Obama promising people can keep their own doctor. What that means is that you have a relationship as a patient with your own doctor, I would assume. Then the doctor-patient relationship is almost sacred. Your doctor works for you. Dr. Duane just mentioned that many specialists in particular, but actually doctors of all stripes, are being driven into employment. And what that creates then is they work for somebody else at that point. They work, for example, a hospital. And at that point, that doctor and hospital aren't working for you anymore. They're working against you because all of the payment schemes that Congress and Obamacare have devised depend upon denial of care. So when you go in to see an employed doctor, who's he really working for? Who is she really working for?
All right, I want to focus in on this because this is crucial. Denial of care. So in other words, the bureaucrats are putting out certain standards. You've got to meet certain standards, otherwise you're penalized and in some other ways punished. So in this respect, it's not so much that the patient is the priority. Complying with federal government dictates, that's the priority.
Yes, and that's trickling down to insurance companies too. And what the electronic medical record system is instituting in hospitals and increasingly in private practices that are affiliated with hospitals are what we call so-called care protocols, where a central bureaucracy of a hospital will decide this is what these people will get, okay? And if you as a doctor work for that hospital and your parameters go out of line, then you start looking to be too expensive, and you're going to get a talking to. And you're going to be asked, why are you spending all this money?
Well, doctor, what I see here in part are quotas, too. We can only do so many knee surgeries because we can't do this. We can only do so many hip surgeries, so many bypass surgeries.
That's part of it, but how do you institute that? Well, you have to get the provider, okay, because it's a doctor that drives that. Now, if they're an independent practice, okay, and this is why your story on there's more to that story on the cancer doctors than you know. If you're an independent practice, you can make a stand against that and advocate for your patient. Because the patient's paying you either directly or through an insurance company. But if your doctor now works for a hospital, for example, or what's being called an accountable care organization, the doctor and the accountable care organization are there to make fiduciary decisions, not care decisions. So you see how you follow the money. Okay? Do you want to go see a doctor who's being paid and monitored using the electronic medical record system about how much money he or she spends in a particular month on his or her patients?
Let me ask you this question. So the way out then is for some doctors to have a total non-insurance practice, right?
Well, yes, but that's kind of impractical for many doctors. I'm a radiologist, for example. It would be very difficult for me to...
No, but I'm talking from the patient perspective. It may,
yes.
From this point. So in other words, wealthier people, they're going to say, I don't need this crap. I don't want all this stuff kept on me. I'm pulling out of this system.
Yeah, and we're seeing that already in so-called concierge medicine practices, which are being attacked even by organizations such as the AMA, which you should know do not represent doctors. I mean,
I know.
Of practice, doctors belong to.
It's like the Bar Association doesn't represent lawyers either. But I want to focus in here. But I suspect one day Congress will punish anything that's outside of this quote-unquote system. Don't you think so?
Well, yeah, but what's the mechanism they're going to do that through? I mean, what is really the mechanism of the death panel? You know, it's not going to, somebody from Washington are going to come out and fly out and decide what care somebody's going to get. It's going to be instituted through these electronic medical record systems, which are monitoring your doctors, okay, as much as the patients. And for example, you know, your doctor may say, you know, I think you need an MRI of your back. And the electronic healthcare record will say, well, let's see, this patient's 68 and hasn't had this, or this. That option won't be available despite what your doctor thinks is best for you. So when the government, we keep hearing about, well, there's not enough doctors. That's a feature under Obamacare, not a bug, because they feel that a negative examination, for example, if a doctor says, well, I think you need an MRI, they look at population statistics, and they decide, you know, we don't think that's indicated based on looking at 10,000 people. Well, that may not apply to you, okay? Mm-hmm. But it may be very important in your case because your doctor thinks there's something wrong. He's got that, you know, spider sense going off.
So a lot of this is going to be determined by statistics. This is what I feared. People are not going to be treated as human beings. There's going to be some formula for this, some formula for that coming down from on high. People are going to suffer from this, aren't they, Doctor?
Oh, absolutely, and it's already starting. You have to understand, there's something like 500,000 doctors in America, and the government decided, you know, how are you going to control them? You can't. So how do you control them? There's 5,000 hospitals. Drive them into hospital employment. And when you see that article on the cancer centers, and if you read it, what you will read is there's statistics that show it's cheaper to treat people in private practice community practices. So why would the government keep paying hospitals to do it at a greater expense? It's because they want private practices to go out of business so they can drive people into hospitals, so they can drive doctors into hospitals and employment situations. And it's much easier to control 500,000 employed doctors through 5,000 hospitals.
How about that? How about that? And that makes plenty of sense. That's why this private entity where they're trying to give these patients the medicine they need and the treatment they need, they're being slashed.
That's correct. And if you look at it, the government is building in, you know, the Republicans could do something or start fighting for something tomorrow that could help reverse this. And that would be, Dr. Duane alluded to this, the hospital reimburses hospitals who employ doctors a lot more, sometimes as much as 2 or 3 times more, for the same service as what a doctor in private practice would provide it for. Mm-hmm. So the incentive then goes to the hospital to want to sort of gobble up all these private practices. That's called provider-based billing. The Republicans could go out and argue that should be eliminated because it's expensive. Why should some people be paid 2 or 3 times more for their service than others? Well, the reason is because the government wants to drive doctors into employment. Now, you can be sure that the second that the critical mass of employed doctors is reached, the government is going to go to those hospitals and cut it.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you something. What town? May I ask what town are you in Montana?
Butte, Montana.
Butte, Montana. Because what's fascinating is we had a doctor call from Boston. We had one call from Oklahoma City. You're in Butte, Montana. This system really is ubiquitous, isn't it?
Yes, it's going on all over, and you know, I've listened to you for months. I mean, what you do best is educate, and I think that you know, educating people on this aspect of it, how is it really, you know, affecting the boots on the ground delivery of medical care, is something that's been overlooked by pretty much all the pundits.
Mm-hmm. Well, Doctor, thank you very much. Your input has been very, very crucial and fascinating and depressing. Not you, but the information. Thank you, Doctor. I don't know. I'm learning an awful lot, Mr. Producer, and I don't like most of it.